Good evening, and welcome to Doctorpiece Theater. Tonight, we're going to continue our dive into This Is Why I Hate You. Last time we left our hero, someone had flirted with his girlfriend, and he was out for some serious revenge. Chapter 3. Crying at my feet. The last entry I made reflected on probably one of the dumbest things I was about to do. Obviously, getting yourself into a fist fight is a mistake when you look at the grand scheme of things. But to say I really had a fair choice in the matter is a joke. The sun hadn't even risen yet. Our decrepit school was filthy and falling apart, as if the walls were composed of maggot-infested flesh and bone. As I approached John, I could hear the cracked tiles straining under my weight. It was immediately after first period had ended, when we crossed paths. Only my path ended upon locating him. I skipped class so I would not miss him walking to his next class. I specifically chose the section of school where he had physically touched my girlfriend before. I said, "John, you ready to hurt?" John, no doubt, felt somewhat uncomfortable, seeing those words come from the lips of someone who looked like me. I intentionally wore a trench coat and all black that day. Normally I didn't wear the coat, but I wanted to make myself appear much larger than I was. This was a strategy I learned from butterflies, creatures whose literal core design exists to scare away predators. Seemed fitting. This man-child clearly liked taking advantage of creatures smaller than him. John tried to act like everything was cool, as one of his jock friends was standing right by him. After taking a brief look into their eyes, it was obvious. Both of them thought their lives could be in danger. This possibility was especially apparent, considering all of the things I might have been hiding under my long black tattered coat. John swore at me, calling me the unpopular emasculating word goth kids are normally subjected to. Fortunately, I punched him in the throat seconds after he spoke it. Now I can realize punching someone directly in the throat can do extensive damage to a person's neck. Neck damage carries the possibility of preventing further breathing. However, a punch to the head, or even between the legs, can kill a man. The truth about our bodies is sad, but it's still reality. We humans are sensitive creatures. The blow I delivered to his throat shocked John's jock friend. He looked like he wanted to help John, but I screamed, threatening to murder him, and he backed off. I think I specifically said, "I'll stab you in the jugular and watch you bleed, meathead." It was a mouthful, but John was busy gasping for air, so I had time. After John fell to the ground, I stood by confidently, waiting for him to return to his feet. Students heard the smack of my fists against his neck and my screaming from hundreds of feet away. Like wasps, they swarmed around us. We love a good fight, don't we? When John returned to his feet, I let him hit me a few times. I knew there was a good chance I would be expelled if I didn't make the fight look at least somewhat even. Once I was bored of my face being tenderized like the meat of a freshly slaughtered animal, I decided to break his arm. I didn't exactly break his arm in the way you'd expect. First, I placed my right leg behind his legs while simultaneously dodging a punch he had just thrown. I then wrapped my right arm around his shoulder, his already tender neck, and applied pressure to send his body flailing backwards towards the ground. Now, as John free fell, I had to make sure to twist his neck so he would land on his stomach. This was absolutely essential for snapping his arm in two. I successfully placed him quite gracefully on the ground without a significant impact. I then placed my boot on the back of his head and screamed, "Are you a righty?" John refused to answer and just struggled under my boot, so I went ahead and assumed he was right-handed. Immediately after, I grabbed his right hand, lifted it up, his arm following, and used my right leg to stomp on his elbow as hard as I could. I imagine this was incredibly painful, considering my right foot was still on his neck, which of course meant the full weight of my body was on one of his most vulnerable body parts. The snap of his arm was rather loud, surprisingly so. I might have just felt arousal from how tremendous it was. Something you don't know about me is that my mom didn't just teach me philosophical lessons. She didn't just teach me how to defend myself, but also how to destroy my enemies. My mother, no doubt, didn't want me to use the techniques she taught me without absolute necessity. But my mother is a better person than I am. Nothing gave me more satisfaction than watching John cry on the ground while stabbing the now inverted arm he used to touch my girlfriend. The other jock stared in horror at me. He couldn't even look at his friend on the ground. It seems he was paralyzed as he looked into my eyes, accompanied with a grin soaked in my own blood on my face. I spoke to the jock. "Congrats, coward! You didn't get stabbed today!" And then spit some of the blood conjured up by the beating I received on his brightly colored Letterman jacket. After only moments into John letting out blood-curdling screams, the school principal erupted in angry screaming for the crowd to disperse. Principal Lehman took a look at my face, and then a look at John grabbing his arm on the ground. I smiled at the principal and said, "Sorry about the mess, but don't worry. It's all my blood." Looking completely freaked out, the principal responded by screaming for me to go to the nurse's office and wait for him there. After an hour of waiting in the nurse's office, 2 police officers came in the room and asked me questions about what happened. They said that because of the extent of John's injuries, they were heavily considering taking me away to juvenile hall. I had opened my mouth up in a way that likely appeared to be a grin to the officers. They seemed upset about this, but their premature emotions were corrected when I pointed to a missing tooth in my mouth. The loss of my tooth, in the addition to the cuts and bruises on my face, were enough to convince them that the damages were mutual, especially considering it only took me 2 strikes to defeat John, while he had struck me around 7 times. The officers understood that if I refused to do anything, John would continue hitting me, and by definition, despite me starting the fight, the action of breaking his arm was self-defense. I made it clear to the police that I was losing my grip on him, and that had I not done what I did, he would surely do to my face even more damage than he already had. This argument was one of the most important aspects of self-justifying self-defense. But let's get past the legal aspects of what I did and get right down to raw intentions. Everything I did, everything I allowed to happen was simply me manipulating my way to and getting away with destroying John. John can't play football this year. John's right hand won't be touching my girlfriend anymore, and John is suspended from school. Unfortunately, I'm suspended twice as long as he is, thanks to the principal clearly seeing through what I did. I'm sure me smiling at him didn't help. On top of everything else, Ashley hasn't spoken to me since. It would be ridiculous if by beating up the guy who touched her, I lose her. But I suppose I didn't just beat him up. My performance was devastating. Maybe I went too far. Who am I kidding? I know I went too far. If Ashley rejects me for this, it won't be crushing. There are many more women where she came from. There are many more of all of us. What a stark reminder there is really no value in our individual lives. Holy motherfucker. That was chapter 3 of This Is Why I Hate You. Greg went to school and for a guy that is at school all the time, he sure doesn't do a lot of school. But it looks like we're in for like a ton of kung fu or something. But this has been Doctorpiece Theater, and my name is Dr. Dennis Business. And as always, my friends,